But first, I'm John Bachman. The White House will not place travel bans on West African nations affected by the Ebola virus. Today, Obama administration officials say current screening systems at airports in West Africa are sufficient, despite the fact that a man traveling from Liberia has been diagnosed with the virus now in Dallas. But many lawmakers are pushing for that ban on inbound flights from West African nations right now. That includes Texas Congressman Ted Poe, who you see right there. He told us that on Newsmax TV earlier today. Also, Senator Ted Cruz says the FAA needs to step up and take extra precautions. And Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal says despite the president's reassurances that Ebola won't make it to America, it of course already has. Later today, we're expecting an update from the HHS secretary and the head of the National Institutes of Health about Ebola. That's happening at the White House a little bit later. We'll keep you posted. Meantime, the mother of a freelance cameraman infected with the disease says her son is trying to stay positive.
I think he's extraordinarily relieved that he is going to be evacuated and come back to the United States for optimum medical care. He's trying to keep his spirits up, but of course it's a very difficult time for him.
Ashoka Mukpo, you see right here from Providence, Rhode Island, is headed back to the States this weekend. The freelance cameraman from NBC contracted Ebola while working for the network in Liberia. And Texas health officials have narrowed down the list of people being monitored to 50. 10, though, are still at high risk. They all had some sort of contact with Thomas Eric Duncan. He was diagnosed with Ebola after traveling to the United States from Liberia. Late yesterday, the number of monitored cases was higher than 100. Now, amid ISIS threats, the Army is telling troops and their families to be careful about what they put online. A new report from the Threat Integration Center points to a continued chatter from ISIS on social media, raising the specter of a possible attack on military personnel or their families. The report also urges military families to think before they post anything online. There are worries that something on social media could be used to track and then terrorize Americans. Hong Kong's pro-democracy protesters have canceled talks with government officials over electoral reforms. Those peaceful protests in Hong Kong not so peaceful today. Fights broke out with locals and supporters of the government in Beijing when they tried to force pro-democracy protesters off the streets. No word on any injuries. And a top Saudi cleric condemning the actions of ISIS at the annual Muslim pilgrimage, or the Hajj, to Mecca, Saudi Arabia. Speaking from Mount Arafat, in Saudi Arabia, Grand Mufti Sheikh Abdul Aziz Al-Sheikh says the ISIS extremists are enemies of Muslim nations. Close to 2 million Muslims from around the world were there for a day of prayer at the peak of the annual Muslim pilgrimage. In August, the Mufti urged youth not to become influenced by the, quote, calls for jihad. And Senator Lindsey Graham says Florida Senator Marco Rubio and a potential presidential candidate may not be quite ready for the Oval Office yet. During an interview with the National Review, Graham says the Florida senator not quite ready to make a presidential run in 2016. We'll have more news in 30 minutes. Now we'll send it up to the Steve Malzberg Show in New York.